Hi, I'm Aminath Zana Shiraz. I am an assistant marine research officer and the lead researcher of the microplastic research program here at the Maldives Marine Research Institute. I'll be present in the preliminary investigation of microplastic distribution and concentration in beach sediments in the Greater Mala region on behalf of my co-authors. So this study is um, a startup of this microplastic research program. This is to understand where these microplastics come from, how they move through the environment, and where they end up. As Maldives is one of the most spatially distributed countries in the world, we have the potential to act as sink and catchment for both local and global microplastic pollution. Um, and this is also to understand how these microplastics may affect the ecosystem. The resulting data of this pilot study will contribute to the development of a national microplastic monitoring framework, which will be embedded in the National Coral Reef Monitoring Framework. Studies in the Maldives are very limited and from very limited locations. So this will hopefully help in further research done here in the Maldives. So the aims and objectives of this pilot study is to establish a baseline, test, test collection, extraction, and analysis methods, collect samples from areas in the Greater Mala region and gather data, understand what type of polymers are present and the size classes of these microplastics, and try to detect hotspots in this region. So how our sampling took place in March of 2021. Beach sediment samples were collected from 3 locations, with each location having 3 sampling sites. These locations are Male, Hulu Male, and Willingili. How our sampling process went is we laid a 20-meter transect tape along the high tide line. We placed a 50 by 50 centimeter quadrat along at 0, 1 to 10 and 20 meters. We collected sub-samples of 100 ml within the quadrat, which was dug up at 5-meter depth to make up a 500 ml sample. With each of the sample jars, a control jar is also opened as well. This is to collect any micro debris that comes from the wind from our surveyors' clothes and the environment surrounding the sample site. We collected 30 samples. 30 samples were taken from each of the 3 locations. Sorry, that's a mistake. Each of the 3 locations, making a total of 90 samples. Measures were taken to minimize any plastic contamination in both field and laboratory work. We noted down the material composition of the clothes of the surveyors and used as much non-plastic equipment as we could. If any plastic equipment were used, we noted down the type of plastic and the color of this plastic. The collected samples were then shipped off to CFAS for laboratory processing. So this is a schematic representation of the beach sand sediment processing and analysis using a focal plane array-based micro FTIR. So our sediments were homogenized and dried, and these were then run through a centrifuge for density separation. This is then filtered through, and these filtered are then dried for 24 to 48 hours and run through the FPA-based micro FTIR for microscopy and image detection. So this is what you'll see during the image detection process. These are two different samples, and as you can see, it's different type of polymer. It has a wide range of polymer composition. We classify these by size, shape, and color. So when we look at the results, this is the site-wise comparison of the number of microplastics in the sites we sampled. At the highest, we have Hulumala with 1,700 microplastics per kilogram of dry weight sand. At the second, we have Willingili with 1,500 microplastics per kilogram of dry weight sand. And at the lowest, we have Male with 600 microplastics per kilogram of dry weight sand. There was an average amount of microplastics ranging from 0 to 600 microplastics per kilogram of dry weight sand in each of the separate samples taken from the site. At an average compared to the other sites that have been sampled at different kinds. Sorry, there was an average. The studies showed similar investigations in different parts of the world, which compared the abundance of microplastics per dry weight sand. While our microplastic abundance seems very high, there are other studies in other places which show microplastics that ranges up to 4,000 microplastics per kilogram of dry weight sand. So this is the percentage of microplastics of different size classes that were detected in our samples. We have a high abundance of microplastics with the size class of 20 to 100 micrometer. This is then the percentage of microplastic then decreases as the size class is increasing. As you can see, at 1,000 to 5,000 micrometer, there is no microplastics recorded. However, this does not mean that the area that we sampled didn't have this size range of microplastics. We saw a link that there may be a link between microplastic abundance and the sediment particle size. As as particle size increase, microplastic abundance decrease. In our particle size analysis, we had a range. Looking at the sediment particle size analysis from the locations where we sampled, sediment particle size is seen to be between 1 millimeter to 30 micrometer. This classified the sediment as fine to coarse sand. From the previous slide, we saw that the highest concentration of microplastics were at around 20 to 100 micrometer, which is similar to the average sediment size in our locations. However, this link is further to be confirmed as we need to collect a wider range of sediment to confirm this. So this is the percentage of polymer composition from the samples we collected. At more than 80%, we had polypropylene, which is found in plastic packaging, machinery parts, fibers, and textiles. The other 19% is made up of rubber type 3, polystyrene, polyurethane, polyethylene chlorinated, and polyethylene. We saw that in our control jars, there was a high number of rubber type 3 and polyurethane present, which made sense because rubber type 3 is found in tires, polyurethane is found in boat varnish, and pretty much all of our sites were surrounded by a lot of vehicles and boats. So in summary, this shows us a small impression of what type of polymers are present and the level of concentration of microplastics in this region. However, the limitations of this pilot study is that there weren't enough replicates to show a true picture of the entirety of the Greater Male region, as results can vary between locations, within locations, as well as in between monsoon seasons. So this requires multiple samplings over time to get a true picture. However, with the help of this pilot study, we were able to take reef sediment sampling in our last survey expedition, where we covered 4 atolls, which was Nunu, Ra, Ba, and Laviani, with a total of 12 sites, and we were able to take 132 reef sediment samples from from two depths, 5 and 10 meters. In the future, we aim to have further sediment sampling in the Greater Mala region to have a better view of the distribution and concentration of microplastics, and more sediment sampling in other atolls, as well as sea surface sampling, biota, and marine fauna sampling. In conclusion, this preliminary study showed us a high abundance in smaller microplastics, which means more chances of harm to the ecosystem around us. The results of this study supports a need for a national monitoring program for plastics and microplastics, and the need for further widespread studies. Thank you for listening.